Hello everyone, my name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about Ode to a Nightingale, written by John Keats. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. Now, Ode to a Nightingale is one of my favorite poems by John Keats. It's just, from my perspective, I think it's just really beautiful. Um, I think it really makes us look at nature in a different way. I mean, in the 21st century, I think we look at nature kind of like, you go outside, you go to a park, and you see birds and things like that, and that's nature to you. But this really makes you look at the beauty of nature, the beauty of the animals that exist in nature. This work to me is just that's what it is. It's beautiful, but at the same time, in its beauty and what's written down, um, it's also dark because of the topics that are discussed. So let's just step into the summary and talk about what happens in this poem, and then we'll talk about some deeper meanings and analyze it. Before we do that, let me just give you guys a sample of what a nightingale sounds like. Hey Google, what does a nightingale sound like?
This is a nightingale.
So that's the sound of a nightingale. I mean, just think about, while we talk about this poem, think about, just being in a forest setting. Think about listening to that sound and the nightingales just singing that song and just singing their tunes. I think birds they just sound so beautiful. I don't know if you've ever heard of a loon. I think those sound even more beautiful. Wait, hold on a minute. Hey Google, what does a loon sound like?
This is a loon. Would you like to hear an owl sound?
No, I didn't ask for that.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to have bothered you. Sorry.
Damn. That's a lot of sass. Okay. Okay, let's get back to this poem. Okay. So this poem, it's a nightingale. Don't think about the loon. I was just giving you an example of what a loon sounds like because they're just beautiful. I mean, birds. There's certain birds that you could just listen to them for hours. They're just so beautiful, and you can get lost in their sounds. But in this poem, we're specifically talking about nightingale. And the narrator is in the woods, and sometimes he's not in the woods, and he's covering so many things here. First and foremost, he doesn't talk about the singing of the bird, of the nightingale. He really talks about the effect that the nightingale has on him and on society. So, first and foremost, the poem goes like this. He talks about how he feels, the way that the nightingale makes him feel, what the Nightingale reminds him of about society, about life, about reality, about consciousness. He goes into saying that he wishes that he could literally run away with the nightingale, and then later he goes into talking about how nothing stays or nothing exists forever. And that's one thing I feel like us as human beings, that's something that we face every day. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter what you have, it can't exist forever. I mean, you buy a brand new phone today, and then a few years down the line, it's old, it's not, I guess, in fashion anymore, and maybe it has a cracked screen or something like that. No matter what you buy, a house, a car, whatever it is, even your own body, it loses its strength over time. It gets weaker over time. You get older and weaker, and then ultimately you die. So everything that's created, everything that exists on the planet, it just kind of like dies. I mean, just look at a flower. You can pluck a flower, and at first it's going to be beautiful, and at first it's going to be amazing. Then a few days later, maybe a week later, depending on how well you treat it, it's withered away, it's ugly, it's old, And that's what's crazy. I mean, no matter, I mean, the women that we praise in society for their beauty, the men that are praised for their looks, intelligence, love, lust, everything everything has its rise, its peak, and its falls. In this poem, for me, that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me that it's just everything is so like nothing is forever, and the narrator within the poem, he's saying like maybe the nightingale sound is forever, because he's saying like there's several lines throughout the poem when he's saying like I'm literally drunk, I'm literally drunk listening to this nightingale, listening to the tune of this nightingale, and I wish that I could just run away with it. So he mentions intoxication a lot. And from my perspective, I think he's getting drunk on this moment that he's having, listening to this nightingale, just taking it in. He mentions Bacchus and his parts. He mentioned, bubbling drinks and alcohol. And again, in America's past, before alcohol was highly regulated within the United States, alcohol was pretty much, used by a lot of men. And that the alcohol that was used in the past in the United States, that was actual alcohol, like pure alcohol, like 100%. People were not calculating how much alcohol they put in beverages. It was just however you felt. I mean, however much alcohol you felt putting in drinks, that's how much you put. So when people say they got drunk back then, they actually did get drunk back then. Until the FDA stepped in, and state governments and government stepped in, and stepped into the United States, and were like, we really should start regulating these things, because a lot of people are getting drunk here. So the poem goes on, and even the nightingale fades away, because the bird, literally the narrator tells us that goodbye to the nightingale. So the nightingale goes away. He thinks about, there's some biblical scripture that comes into this poem, history comes into this poem, and he kind of like talks about society, this grinding effect of society where you're challenged and you're isolated, and you're within the midst of people that you have to exist with. And all the trifles and tribulations and all the obstacles of life, they all come in. But the thing is that he's like, they all last for a moment. And he says that maybe this poem, maybe in its beauty, in its art form, maybe he can compare it to the nightingale. Maybe he can fly on the wings of poesy. So this poem, maybe he can find the wings of this poem. Maybe he can escape to the world of the nightingale. Because the thing is, like, the way that the narrator is thinking is that the nightingale doesn't have to face all of the problems that humankind have to face. The problems with, living, working, raising a family, existing, progress, success, failure, disease, love, lust. I mean, the basic human life is filled with a lot of good things, but at the same time, you can't be a human if you don't go through all of your emotions. I mean, you're go through bouts of happiness, sadness, depression, anger, lust, love, envy, hate. We're all human, and everyone has those emotions. You can't skip over them. And if you're a type of person that bottles up those emotions, it doesn't mean you don't have them. You still have them. They still exist. So, the narrator kind of like tells us about the dark side of human existence and everything that humankind have to go through, and then he compares it to this nightingale in song, and how and he thinks that the life of the nightingale is all beauty and all majesty and greatness, because the nightingale is in a forest setting. It's singing, it's singing a song. It's beautiful when you hear it. And it's majestic. And when you think about not just that nightingale, because everything dies eventually, but if you think about nightingales throughout history, they've been singing the same tunes. The species has been singing the same tune forever. It's their way of communicating with the world, I presume, and communicating with each other in the world. because that's the sound. Those are the sounds that nightingales make, and they've been making them forever since the species existed. I'm assuming, and so he's saying that kind of like, that nightingale that he's listening to, it might die, but the species is going to keep singing that tune, and that beauty, that art of that tune will always exist. This is a very fascinating poem. It really dissects nature and the love of nature and the art of nature, because nature is just it's literally an orchestra. When you think about nature, when you think about a forest and its sounds and its animals and everything that goes on in a forest. And another thing I feel like that this poem talks about is kind of like death. There's a lot of death in here and dying. I mean, there's several points where the narrator just pretty much wishes that, he would be dead or die, because that's the only way he could escape the human world. The human world can be quite horrific. Just look at human history. For God's sakes, humankind invented the guillotine to kill each other more efficiently. We've invented more weapons to kill each other than things to help us. You could just think about the lines or the library of weapons that humans have created. Anything sharp, anything lethal, anything, from chemicals to weapons to devices. We've created more things to hurt and deform and maim each other more than we've created things to help each other, which is quite horrifying. And so when he talks about the horrific side of humankind and all of the bad things that happen with life, you can understand that. There's definitely truth within those words. But at the same time, he's looking at Mother Nature, he's looking at the nightingale, he's saying, man, that's much better. Now, again, we don't know what the life of the nightingale is. Maybe its life is all about, greatness and singing, and there's no misery in the life of the nightingale. We're just getting the perspective of the narrator telling us, what he's experiencing, his thoughts, his emotions. He goes through his isolation and thoughts of escape. Because the nightingale seems so peaceful and so happy that, why couldn't I be a part of that world? John Keats, when you're a author, a writer, you're going to get a lot of critiques, All of the world's major authors, the names that, we praise today in the world of literature, they go through a lot in terms of people critiquing them, in terms of revisions and things, in terms of their works not being successful. A lot of major authors, a lot of major writers, they're starving artists. Their works last on forever, and we read their works forever, but there's a lot of authors that, if you read their bios, their lives are very horrific, and they have to go through a lot to make it. And so it's a critique of the world, I feel like, that's very accurate, and also I think it teaches us a lot about life, because authors, writers, poets, they spend years, months, and just a lot of time thinking about their works and developing their works, and their life experiences reflect on their works, and they kind of like build a picture for us of what the meaning of life is and what exists in life, and certain beauties that we can take from it. So the nightingale is kind of like that, one of those beauties where, you wish you kind of could live freely and happily and just be lost, be drunk within the world of the nightingale. So that's pretty much, that's the summary. And I think I touched upon the analysis and what it's talking about, how it's observing society, how it's going into, the darkness of the world. And sometimes we just need to escape. Because the narrator mentions escape a lot, and he also really dives into how nothing lasts forever. That's why, when people hoard things and when people try to build, if you spend your entire life building wealth and building success, and you never actually take some time to enjoy people and smile and laugh with your friends and family and really enjoy just existing, your life will get by you, because life is so temporary. I mean, most human beings on the planet in the 21st century, most human beings are not even living to like 70. Because when you think about it, there's like 31 completely developed countries in the world. I would say there's only like 31 completely developed countries in the world, and every country after that, they have, they're not. I wouldn't say they're third world countries or developing countries, but they're not as, I guess, advanced as those 31 countries. And most people, when you don't live in a first world country, your life expectancy is lower. You probably don't have health insurance. You don't have safety nets. You're living by the seat of your pants. So, I mean, for most people around the world, around the world in the 21st century, a lot of people still don't have internet and access to power and access to clean water. I mean, there are some places in the world where you can step into today and it kind of feels like you're stepping back like 100, 200 years into the past. So for most people, life is still quite difficult and hard and arduous. So there's a lot to go through, but I mean, at least you got the Nightingale, and you can focus on the art of nature and hear the sound of the Nightingale. So I guess that's somewhat of a prize. I mean, you know what? Let's cheer everyone up. Let's listen to the Nightingale one more time. Hey Google, what does a nightingale sound like?
This is a nightingale.
Doesn't that sound beautiful? That is absolutely beautiful. Well, at least I think so. But you gotta take it one day at a time. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment. And I'll see you guys in the next video.